Monday, November 24th, 2025, AGNDD intelliReport topic. Hedonism. Please pardon any visual and informational inaccuracies in this entirely AI-generated article-based video. Dive into hedonism, from ancient Greek roots to modern philosophical types, focusing on psychological hedonism's take on pleasure as life's ultimate motivator. Hedonism encompasses a range of philosophical views on pleasure's role, typically divided into three types: psychological, linking pleasure to motivation; axiological, to value; and ethical, to right action. These categories are standard in modern philosophy, but ancient thinkers often blended them without clear separation. The term originates from the ancient Greek hedon, meaning pleasure, and first appeared in English in the 1850s. Summary of psychological hedonism. Psychological hedonism posits that all human actions are motivated by the pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain, operating consciously or unconsciously. As a form of egoism, it suggests people act altruistically only if it yields personal benefits. It doesn't claim all actions succeed in achieving pleasure. Errors in belief or skill can lead to failure. The standard view holds pleasure and pain as the sole motivators, while variants like reflective hedonism limit this to rational deliberation. Genetic hedonism traces desires to pleasure origins, and Darwinian hedonism views it evolutionarily for survival. Proponents praise its intuitiveness, explaining direct and indirect pleasure-seeking, and link altruism to conditioned rewards from selfish drives. Critics counter with examples of genuine altruism, for example, self-sacrifice, or non-pleasure motives like posthumous fame, arguing evolutionary biology supports true altruism for reliable behaviors like parental care. Axiological hedonism posits that pleasure is the sole intrinsic value, with other things valuable only instrumentally if they produce pleasure or reduce pain. Intrinsic value is inherent like pleasure itself, while instrumental value derives from outcomes such as money enabling pleasures or painful surgery preventing greater pain. Quantitative hedonism measures pleasure's value by intensity and duration, whereas qualitative hedonism adds quality, valuing intellectual joys, for example art, philosophy, over basic bodily ones. Prudential hedonism applies this to well-being, claiming a life's goodness depends solely on its net pleasure-pain balance, though other intrinsic values like beauty may exist. Proponents argue pleasure is intuitively desirable and the root of all value, equating good with pleasurable. Critics counter that sadistic pleasures are bad and pluralism allows values like beauty, Moore's beautiful versus filthy worlds, or authenticity, Nozick's experience machine rejecting artificial bliss for real experiences. Ethical hedonism posits that pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain are the supreme moral principles, with other values like duty or justice mattering only insofar as they affect these. It splits into utilitarian and egoistic forms. Utilitarian hedonism, or classical utilitarianism, requires maximizing overall happiness for everyone affected, treating one's own pleasure equally to others. This may demand sacrifices, such as Peter Singer's call for affluent individuals to donate significantly to aid the needy. Egoistic hedonism focuses solely on personal pleasure, considering others' well-being only if it impacts one's own, for example, avoiding harm to prevent guilt. It's controversial, potentially justifying harm if it boosts personal net pleasure. Often linked to consequentialism, it evaluates acts by outcomes tied to pleasure-pain. Utilitarian strengths include impartiality, simplicity, and adaptability. Critics highlight excessive demands, risks of injustice, for example, sacrificing rights for the greater good, and challenges in measuring consequences. Aesthetic hedonism is a subjective theory positing that aesthetic value in objects like paintings or songs derives from the pleasure they evoke in people. It emphasizes personal responses, contrasting with objective views that rely on inherent features such as symmetry. Variants include broad pleasure-based valuations or those limited to responses from individuals with refined taste. In everyday usage, hedonism pejoratively denotes Folk hedonism, a self-centered lifestyle chasing immediate gratifications, like excessive sex or drugs, ignoring long-term harms. This can damage health, finances, relationships, and societal duties affecting both the individual and others. Philosophical hedonists argue such behavior fails to yield enduring happiness, rejecting it as misguided. Pleasure and pain are core experiences of attraction and repulsion, influencing emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, and central to hedonism. They vary in intensity along a continuum from positive, pleasure, through neutral to negative, pain, though some hedonists prioritize pain avoidance over pleasure pursuit, rejecting symmetry. Their nature is debated, impacting hedonism's forms. Everyday views limit them to specifics like sexual or culinary enjoyment, or injury pain. Hedonists broaden this to any positive, for example, sunset joy, or negative, for example, grief, feeling. Traditionally, they're seen as bodily sensations akin to heat or cold. Modern philosophy views them as attitudes, attraction toward enjoyable objects or aversion to suffering ones, lacking fixed bodily location and always object-directed. Philosophers and psychologists measure pleasure and pain to understand their causes and decision-making roles, often using self-report questionnaires with scales like -4 to +4. Methods include retrospective assessments relying on memory or real-time evaluations to minimize biases. Challenges arise from subjectivity, lack of standardized metrics, inaccurate scale reflections, and inter-individual differences in scale usage. Neuroscientists employ PET scans and fMRI to bypass these, though the neurological basis of happiness remains incompletely understood. Jeremy Bentham's hedonic calculus quantifies experiences to determine optimal actions by summing contributions to happiness. Factors include intensity, duration, certainty, propinquity, fecundity, purity, and extent, people affected. Simplified versions emphasize only intensity and duration for intrinsic value. Summary of hedonism, happiness, well-being, and eudaimonia. Hedonism often equates happiness with the net balance of pleasure over pain, where more pleasure yields happiness. Alternative views define happiness as overall life satisfaction, influenced by pleasure but also other elements. Well-being measures ultimate personal good, with pleasure as a key component. Debates persist on whether it's sole, prudential hedonism, or includes factors like health, knowledge, and friendship. Desire satisfaction theories posit well-being as fulfilling desires. Eudaimonia, from ancient Greek philosophy, for example Aristotle, denotes flourishing through a fulfilling life and realizing innate potentials. While sharing hedonism's focus on long-term happiness, eudaimonic ethics prioritize virtues, active self-realization, and moral development over mere pleasure. The paradox of hedonism posits that directly chasing pleasure often hinders happiness, making it more effective as a byproduct of other pursuits. For instance, a tennis player focused on winning may derive greater enjoyment than one fixated on maximizing fun. While controversial, it suggests deliberate happiness-seeking can backfire, though success occurs in some cases. Relatedly, the hedonic treadmill theory claims people revert to a baseline happiness level after major life changes, positive or negative. Lottery winners, for example, experience temporary joy from wealth but return to prior happiness within a year as they adapt. This implies long-term happiness boosts, via healthy living or societal improvements, are futile. Though empirically supported in areas like income, the theory's strength and universality remain debated. Non-hedonist theories challenge hedonism by rejecting its emphasis on pleasure as the ultimate good. One variant acknowledges pleasure as valuable but not the sole factor in a good life. Another distinguishes between good and bad pleasures, while anti-hedonism deems all pleasures inherently bad, viewing them as irrational emotions that hinder a fulfilling existence. Asceticism embodies this rejection through rigorous self-discipline, foregoing worldly indulgences like sex, drugs, food, and social ties, often via fasting, isolation, prayer, or meditation. Primarily driven by spiritual or religious goals, such as divine communion or purification, asceticism typically opposes hedonism. However, ascetic hedonism merges the two, positing that disciplined renunciation yields superior, profound spiritual joys over fleeting sensory ones, enhancing overall happiness. Hedonism, one of philosophy's oldest theories, may trace to the Epic of Gilgamesh, 2100–2000 BCE. In ancient Greece, Aristippus, 435–356 BCE, pioneered egoistic hedonism, emphasizing immediate sensory pleasures via the Cyrenaic school. Plato critiqued this, advocating balanced pleasure with virtue and reason. Aristotle linked pleasure to eudaimonia, fulfilling human potential. Epicurus, 341–271 BCE, promoted moderated hedonism, favoring tranquility and pain avoidance over excess, contrasting Cyrenaic indulgence. Cynics like Antisthenes rejected pleasure as a barrier to freedom, while Stoics prioritized virtue. Lucretius expanded Epicureanism, stressing overcoming fears like death for happiness. In ancient India, 6th–5th centuries BCE, the Charvaka school endorsed egoistic hedonism, urging present enjoyment absent God or afterlife, against ascetic Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions. In China, Yangzhu, c. 440–360 BCE, championed self-interest and desire fulfillment, inspiring Yangism. Hedonism received limited attention in medieval philosophy. Early Christian thinker Augustine of Hippo, 354–430 CE, critiqued ancient Greek hedonism, viewing earthly pleasures as barriers to a God-centered spiritual life. Thomas Aquinas, 1225–1274 CE, offered a refined view, often called spiritual hedonism, positing that humans naturally pursue happiness, achievable only through the beatific vision of God. In Islamic thought, Al-Razi, c. 864–925 or 932 CE, emphasized pleasure's role, advocating moderation akin to Epicureanism, balancing excess and asceticism. Al-Farabi, c. 878–950 CE, and Avicenna, 980–1037 CE, argued that ultimate human good lies in intellectual happiness, attainable solely in the afterlife. History of hedonism. In the early modern era, Lorenzo Valla blended Epicurean hedonism with Christian ethics, viewing sensory pleasures as paths to virtue. Enlightenment thinkers like Hobbes advanced psychological hedonism, seeing self-interest in pleasure as motivation, while Locke tied good, evil to pleasure, pain. Butler critiqued this. Hume emphasized pleasure in ethics and emotions, and de Sade promoted unrestrained indulgence. Bentham's utilitarianism shifted to maximizing collective pleasure via hedonic calculus, intensity, duration. Mill added pleasure quality, valuing intellectual over sensory joys. Sidgwick refined distinctions like ethical versus psychological hedonism. Nietzsche rejected hedonism for self-overcoming through suffering. Brentano viewed pleasure as an attitude, echoed by Chisholm. Freud's pleasure principle sought instant gratification, tempered by reality. 20th century critics like Moore, Ross, Broad, Brandt, and Nozick, Experience Machine, challenged pleasure's sole value, citing pluralism and authenticity. Modern adaptations include Feldman's adjusted hedonism, Singer's animal-inclusive effective altruism, Onfray's Epicurean revival, Peirce's transhumanist suffering elimination, and positive psychology's empirical focus. Positive psychology focuses on cultivating happiness and optimal functioning, emphasizing more than just the absence of mental illness. It explores pleasure, pain, character traits, and societal impacts. Hedonic psychology, a key pillar, studies pleasant, unpleasant experiences, their biological roles as signals for behavior, and obstacles like anhedonia or hedonophobia, providing scientific insights into hedonism. In economics, welfare economics evaluates policies for social well-being, with hedonist views prioritizing pleasure. The economics of happiness links wealth to joy, while hedonic regression values commodities by utility. Animal ethics applies hedonism to minimize animal suffering, with quantitative hedonists equating human and animal experiences, and qualitative ones weighting human pleasures higher. Though critiqued in many religions, hedonism appears in Christian hedonism and popular culture via consumerism, entertainment, and the sexual revolution. In essence, psychological hedonism sparks ongoing debate, challenging us to reflect on whether pleasure truly drives every human action.
Thank you for watching this AGNDD intelliReport, dear viewers. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell button to get notified during new uploads. And make sure to tune in next time. Stay safe and healthy. Cheers.